In this video, I'll show you how I transformed these rusty, seized up rear brake calipers into brand new looking ones, all at a fraction of the cost. Disclaimer, I am not a professional car mechanic. If you don't have a good level of mechanical skill, do not mess with a car's braking system. This isn't a how-to guide, just how I rebuilt my calipers. So here we're starting the strip down of the caliper. I've sped this bit up as it's not too bad of a job to strip down. The hard part is putting the thing back together. If you're interested in just that, please skip to 1 minute 37 for a slowed down version of the rebuild. Here I am also checking the parts that I've got to rebuild the caliper, just double checking them against the old ones that are coming out, just to make sure I have got the right parts. I got the rebuild kits for these rear calipers just off of eBay. It was £42 to do both calipers. Once stripped, everything was given a good clean. The bare metal was prepped and then 3 good coats of caliper paint was applied. Caliper paint I went with for these calipers was from Light, and I think it came from Amazon. It's on screen now, just went for plain silver. To reassemble this caliper, I had to make a special tool using the adjustment screw from the inside of an old piston. Now, I took the adjustment screw, welded a nut to it, and along with a spacer and a few washers, this is what allowed me to compress the Belleville springs on the adjustment screw that attaches to the piston. So here I'm installing the seal that seals against the adjustment screw that attaches to the piston. This is what you would call the back seal maybe. It basically stops any oil leaking past the screw that screws into the back of the piston. I'm just making sure here that the seal is sitting nice and flush, hasn't twisted at all when it's been fitted into the caliper. So just to make sure it's all sitting nicely. So now we're installing the main piston seal. This is a square section seal, so again when fitting it you need to make sure it doesn't twist or anything like that. Actually here, once I'd fitted it, I'd noticed it wasn't sitting flush inside the caliper, so I've just whipped it back out there and there was a little bit of debris inside the groove where the seal sits, which was making the seal not sit correctly in the caliper. So just pulled it back out there, give the groove a good little clean out, so we know when we put the seal back in this time it's going to be sitting nice and flush as it should be. So now on to probably the hardest part of this caliper rebuild, installing the piston adjustment screw into the caliper. Now I'm just putting a little bit of lubrication on the seal, just so when we push this adjustment screw into the caliper over the seal, it doesn't cause any damage to the seal itself. Now I'm going to use this special little tool that I've got here. So basically we've got a couple of washers and a spacer to sit in there. So I'm going to screw this onto the adjustment screw. Now what this will do, it will compress the Belleville springs on the other side, so basically pull them in and clamp them down, and then this will allow us to put the handbrake control lever through the caliper and get it positioned correctly. So now with the control screw fully compressed, we are going to lubricate the two pivot points for the caliper lever and also the piece of metal that sits against the screw and the handbrake lever. So it comes in the kit, there's a little bag of grease, so we're just going to get that liberally applied, and then we are going to push the handbrake actuator lever through the caliper into its proper position. Now if we didn't have this little tool to compress the two Belleville springs that's on the adjustment screw, this would be very, very difficult. As you can see here, since we have the special tool compressing those springs, the handbrake lever has just slid in ever so easily. So now just putting the little circlip on the end of the handbrake actuator on. So get that, make sure that's sitting in the groove nice, and a little test there just to make sure everything's still working as it should be. Now we're going to install the piston itself here now, so we're applying a little bit of lubrication to that inner seal that the piston sits against, and a little bit on the piston as well, just so it slides in. Obviously said before, it's a square section seal, so need a good bit of lubrication on there to avoid damaging the seal as we enter the piston. Now the piston needs to screw onto the adjuster, so this is what we're doing here, just screwing that in, so that should be meeting the adjustment screw and the thread inside the piston is turning and screwing onto the adjustment rod. With the piston partially in, we're now going to install the dust seal onto the piston. It sits into a groove on the piston and also a groove on the caliper. I'm using a little pick here just to help get the seal seated. Always be careful with a pick as they are sharp or can be sharp. This one I know is a little bit blunt, so I'm happy to use it on this sort of thing. But you wouldn't want to use a brand new one with a nice sharp point on it, as you could quite easily poke it through a rubber seal. Now we're just getting that piston screwed the rest of the way in, so it's as far as it can go. Now just another little test on the actuator arm, just to make sure that that's working okay as well. Just going to apply a bit more grease to the moving parts before we fit the main seal over the back of the handbrake mechanism. The seal's there just to obviously keep the dirt and water and things like that out, so just make sure we've got some plenty of grease in there, but not too much so it's getting on the actual rubber, which is going to make getting it on a little bit difficult. Now we're installing the O-rings for the caliper slides. There's two O-rings on each slide, so there's two grooves inside the caliper. Again, we want to make sure those grooves are nice and clean before we fit the O-rings, and again we want to make sure the O-rings, when we are fitting them, that we do not twist them in any way. Once the O-rings are fitted, we are going to apply some lubrication to inside where the O-rings are. This allows the caliper slides to slide. Next up, we need to fit the dust seals for the caliper slides. There's 4 of these seals, and these just simply press in with a bit of force. They just press in to the caliper. And that leaves us with the slides themselves to fit to the caliper. These can be a little bit fiddly as there's 2 grooves on each slide, and obviously the groove wants to bite into the dust seal, so they can be a little bit fiddly, but just took my time here, fiddled on, little screwdriver, little pick, just pulling and pushing, and eventually they will go where you want them to. very difficult. Last but not least, we'll stick a cable tie on the rear dust cover for the handbrake mechanism, just to stop it sliding off. And that is the caliper finished and ready to be reassembled onto the car. You just need to repeat the whole process for the opposite side caliper. So just to run through the costs now, the caliper rebuild kits were £42, which I got them from eBay, and also a can of caliper paint, which was £15. So all in all, although quite a labour intensive job, a fairly cheap way to refurbish your rear brake calipers. If you've made it this far, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.